The market was alive with noise, voices rising and falling like a storm. Bright lights hung from the ceiling of the alien bazaar, glowing in strange colors. Stalls overflowed with food, fruit, and bread. The smell of roasted meat filled the air. Everyone pushed and shouted, holding bags, trading credits, trying to get the best deal. In the middle of this busy place stood a woman. She was thin, her eyes tired, and her clothes old. Her 2 children clung to her legs. Their faces were pale, their stomachs empty. The single mother had walked miles just to buy food. She had counted every coin, every little credit she had left. Tonight she wanted to bring something home for her children. Her hands shook as she placed a loaf of bread, a small bag of rice, and 2 apples on the counter. It wasn't much, but to her it was everything. Her children looked up at her with hope. Maybe tonight they would sleep with full stomachs. Maybe they would smile again. The cashier scanned the items. The screen lit up with the total price. The woman's heart dropped. It was more than she had counted. Her hands searched her pockets, trembling, pulling out every last coin. She pushed them forward, but the numbers on the screen didn't match. She was short. The people behind her grew impatient. An alien with sharp horns clicked his tongue. Another hissed in annoyance. "Hurry up," someone growled. "Some of us have work to do." Laughter followed, cruel and sharp. The mother's face burned with shame. She whispered, I don't have enough." Her voice cracked. She reached for the bread, ready to return it. Her children's eyes widened in fear. They knew what that meant. Another night of hunger. Another night of going to bed with nothing. But before she could take the bread away, a hand stopped her. It was the cashier's hand. Strong, steady, human. He looked at her with calm eyes. Unlike the others, he wasn't angry. He wasn't mocking. His voice was low but firm. "Keep it." The woman froze. She didn't understand. "But I can't pay," she whispered. The human cashier shook his head. "I'll cover it," he said. He slid his own card into the reader. The machine beeped, confirming the payment. Gasps spread through the line. The aliens stared, confused, even outraged. "Why would a human waste money on her?" one sneered. "Pathetic," another muttered. The woman stood there, tears welling in her eyes. She didn't know what to say. No one had ever done this for her before. In her world, kindness was rare, almost impossible. Yet this stranger, this human, had given her children food. Her daughter tugged on her sleeve. "Mama, we can eat tonight," the little girl whispered, her voice trembling with joy. The mother looked at the cashier again. His face was calm, but his eyes carried something heavy, something deep. He didn't smile, but there was no doubt in his action. He meant it. Behind them, the line grew restless. Some muttered insults. Others just stared in silence. But the woman didn't care anymore. She clutched the bread to her chest, holding it like treasure. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. I don't know how to repay you." The cashier only nodded. "Feed your children," he said softly. "That's enough." The mother hurried out of the line, her children skipping beside her, their small hands clutching the apples like they were jewels. The crowd parted, some with disgust, others with silent wonder. But the cashier stayed where he was. He scanned the next items, his face calm, as if nothing had happened. Yet in that moment, something had changed. His simple act had left ripples in the air. Some would call him foolish. Others would whisper that it was dangerous. And yet for the single mother, it was more than food. It was hope. As she left the market, she glanced back one last time. Why, human cashier stood tall behind the counter, his eyes already on the next customer. But to her, he was no longer just a worker. He was a light in a dark world, and the story of what he had done was only beginning to spread. The market doors closed behind the mother, and the cold evening air wrapped around her. Her children ran ahead, holding the apples like trophies, their laughter echoing in the empty street. For them, it was joy. For her, it was relief. She pressed the bread close to her chest, her heart heavy with emotions she couldn't name. A stranger had paid for her food. A human. As she walked, her mind replayed the scene again and again. The voices of the mocking crowd, the shame burning her cheeks, the sound of the cashier's card sliding into the reader. And then his words, simple, firm. Feed your children. That's enough. Why? She asked herself over and over. Why would he do this? She lived in a world where kindness was rare, especially between species. Humans were often seen as outsiders, workers who came from distant colonies. They were tolerated, sometimes feared, but never trusted. And yet, this human cashier had stepped forward when no one else did. Her son tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, do you think he's an angel?" His wide eyes shone with innocence. The mother shook her head, but her lips trembled into a small smile. "No, my love. He's just a good man." Behind them in the market, the human cashier finished his shift. The noise of the bazaar was gone now. Only silence remained as he cleaned the counter, wiped the screens, and shut down the machine. His co-workers avoided his eyes. Some shook their heads in disapproval. Others whispered as he walked past. "That human thinks he's a hero," one muttered. "He'll regret it," another replied. But the cashier didn't respond. His steps were slow, steady, as he left the market and walked into the dim streets. His apartment was small, a single room with a broken heater and a thin bed. The walls were cracked and the lights flickered. He placed his empty wallet on the table and sat down. He had given away more than he could afford. His dinner would be plain bread and water tonight. Still, when he closed his eyes, he didn't regret it. He saw the mother's trembling smile, the children's shining eyes. For him, that was worth more than coins. Yet in the shadows of the city, news traveled fast. The story of what happened at the checkout line was already spreading. Some called him foolish. Others called him dangerous. "Humans shouldn't interfere," they whispered. "It will cause trouble." The next morning, the mother returned. She carried nothing in her hands, only her children walking beside her. She stepped inside the market, her heart racing. She didn't want to cause him more problems, but she couldn't stay away. She had to thank him. The cashier stood at the counter again, scanning items, his face calm and quiet. When he saw her, he froze for a moment, then gave the smallest nod. The mother stepped forward, her children hiding behind her. She bowed her head. "I came to thank you," she said softly. "You didn't have to do what you did, but you saved us." The cashier said nothing at first. His eyes searched hers, serious and steady. Then he asked, "Did your children eat?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered. They slept with full stomachs for the first time in weeks. The little girl stepped forward shyly, holding out something small. It was a trinket made of thread and beads, clearly handmade. The colors didn't match, the shape was crooked, but her tiny hands held it out with pride. "For you," the girl said, "because you gave us food." The market fell silent. Customers turned to watch. Some sneered, others frowned, but a few paused in thought. A child giving a gift to a human? Such a thing was rare. The cashier looked at the trinket for a long moment. Then he bent down, his big hand carefully taking the small gift. He nodded once, his face unreadable, but his voice was warm. "Thank you." The mother's heart ached. She knew the crowd was watching, judging, but she didn't care. This was more than food. It was dignity. It was hope. But among the crowd, not all were silent. A group of alien guards stood at the corner, their armor glinting under the lights. Their eyes narrowed as they watched the scene. To them, this wasn't kindness. This was a problem. A human earning respect among aliens? That was dangerous. The cashier returned to his work, scanning items again, as if nothing had happened. Yet the mother knew. This was not the end. His simple act had touched more than her family. It had touched the market, the city, maybe even beyond. The guards turned away, whispering among themselves. Plans were already forming. The mother pulled her children close and left the market. Her steps were hurried, her heart heavy. She was grateful, but she was also afraid, because sometimes, even small kindness could wake up forces bigger than anyone could imagine. Night came quietly over the city. The market's bright colors faded into shadows and the streets emptied of voices. In a small apartment, the human cashier sat alone at a wooden table. A single light flickered above him, buzzing faintly, giving the room a tired glow. On the table lay a plate with nothing but a crust of bread and a half-empty cup of water. He tore the bread into small pieces, chewing slowly, stretching every bite. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. He had chosen this. He had given away his money to that mother and her children. Still, he couldn't stop the question that circled in his mind. How long can I keep living like this? He worked long hours, 6 days a week, yet the credits he earned barely covered rent and food. His hands were rough from carrying heavy boxes. His back ached from standing too long. Every night he returned to this empty apartment, and every night he wondered if he would make it through another week. And yet, when he thought about the children's faces shining with joy as they bit into the apples, he felt a quiet warmth in his chest that was worth something no money could buy. The trinket the little girl had given him lay on the table. Made of cheap beads and thread, it was clumsy, imperfect. But he looked at it as if it were gold. To him, it was more valuable than all the credits in the city. Far across town, the single mother sat with her children in their small home. They ate the bread carefully, saving pieces for later. Her son laughed, her daughter sang softly, and for the first time in months there was joy in their home. But the mother's heart was restless. She kept thinking of the human cashier. Why would he risk so much for her? Humans didn't owe her anything. Most avoided her kind. Many treated her people as less than dirt. But he had done the opposite. She didn't know that in his own small room, he was sacrificing too. She didn't know his cupboards were almost empty, his savings nearly gone. To her, he looked strong, steady. But inside, he was fighting his own battle. The next day at the market, the cashier returned to work. His co-workers gave him cold looks. One alien hissed under his breath as he passed. Another spoke loudly on purpose. Humans think they can buy respect with coins. Pathetic. The cashier ignored them, but deep inside the words stung. He had always been an outsider here, tolerated but not welcomed. Now, after what he had done, he knew he would be watched more closely. Customers noticed too. Some avoided his line, muttering that they wouldn't let a human touch their goods. Others came quietly, their eyes uncertain, but they chose his counter over the others. They weren't ready to say anything, but a seed of respect had been planted. During his short break, he sat alone at the back of the market, eating from a small tin of plain rice. A shadow fell over him. He looked up to see one of the alien guards, tall and armored, staring down at him. "You think your little act makes you special?" the guard said, his voice low and threatening. "You think helping one alien changes anything?" The cashier met his gaze but said nothing. The guard leaned closer. "Be careful, human. This city doesn't like troublemakers. And kindness is trouble." With that, the guard walked away, his heavy steps echoing in the silence. The cashier sat there, his rice untouched. He knew the warning was real. His simple choice at the checkout line had been noticed by the wrong people. That night, as he walked home, he passed by a group of beggars on the street. They were thin, wrapped in rags, their eyes hollow with hunger. He stopped, pulled the crust of bread from his pocket, the only food he had saved, and handed it to them. "Why?" one of them whispered. The cashier only shook his head. "Because no one else will." He walked away, his stomach empty but his heart steady. In the shadows, unseen, the single mother watched him. She had followed from a distance, curious, worried. When she saw him give away even his last bread, her chest tightened. She realized the truth. He wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. He was struggling just as she was. And yet, he still gave. Tears filled her eyes. She whispered to herself, "He has less than us, but his heart is greater than all of them." The wind carried her words away into the night, but she knew she could no longer stay silent. The human cashier had helped her when no one else would. Now she had to find a way to help him, because his struggle, hidden behind calm eyes and quiet strength, was greater than anyone imagined. And soon, the whole city would see it. The next morning came with gray skies. The marketplace was already alive with noise, merchants shouting, coins clinking, and the smell of fresh bread drifting through the air. But there was a strange tension too. Word of the human cashier's act had spread farther than anyone expected. Some called it kindness, others whispered it was rebellion. The human stood behind his counter again, scanning items with his usual calm. His face was quiet, his eyes steady, but inside he felt the weight of the stares around him. Every customer seemed to judge him. Some turned away, refusing to step into his line. Others stepped forward with hesitant respect, placing their food before him silently. He worked as if nothing had changed, but everything had. By midday, as the noise of the bazaar reached its peak, a familiar figure appeared in the crowd, the single mother. She walked slowly, her children holding her hands. Their clothes were patched, their shoes worn thin, but their faces carried a glow. They had eaten. They had laughed. For a brief time, they had known peace. Her heart pounded as she approached the counter. She wasn't sure if she should come back. She feared making his life harder, but gratitude pulled her forward. She couldn't let his kindness go unanswered. The cashier's eyes lifted. For a moment, his hand froze above the scanner. Recognition flickered across his face. He gave her a small nod. Nothing more. But to her, it felt like a mountain moving. She stopped in front of him, her children peeking shyly from behind her. The little boy clutched something hidden in his pocket. The girl's small hand held a folded piece of cloth. The mother bowed her head. Her voice shook. "I came, not to ask, only to thank." The crowd around them quieted. Some leaned closer, to hear. Others frowned, disapproving. Gratitude across species was rare, almost forbidden, but she didn't care. The little girl stepped forward first. She opened the cloth in her hands. Inside was a small carving of wood, rough and uneven. "I made this," she whispered. "For you." The cashier looked down. The carving was simple, a bird with crooked wings, its beak chipped. Yet in her tiny hands it was priceless. He reached out slowly, his rough hand careful as he took the fragile gift. "Thank you," he said softly. His voice carried warmth that the girl would remember forever. Next, the boy pulled out his treasure. It was a shiny pebble, polished by hours of rubbing in his pocket. "It's lucky," he said seriously. "It will protect you." The human cashier took the stone, his lips pressing into a faint smile. "Then I'll keep it safe," he replied. He slipped it into his pocket like it was more valuable than gold. The mother felt tears burn her eyes. She had come with nothing, only thanks. But her children had turned scraps into treasures, and the human had accepted them with grace. Yet not everyone approved. From across the market, alien guards watched the scene closely. Their eyes narrowed, their hands resting on their weapons. To them, this was dangerous. A human earning loyalty from alien children? A mother bowing in respect? That was not allowed. One of the guards muttered, "This will spread. If more follow, the balance breaks." Another replied, "Then we break him before it spreads." The cashier noticed the guard's eyes on him. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He returned to scanning the next items, his hands steady, his face calm. But he knew trouble was coming. When the mother turned to leave, she caught sight of the guards. Her heart skipped. Fear rushed through her veins. She pulled her children close, whispering, "Stay near me. Don't look at them." They hurried out of the market, her mind racing. She understood now. His act of kindness had not only saved her children, it had also painted a target on his back. That evening, as the sun dipped low, the human cashier walked home along the quiet street. He carried the wooden carving and the lucky stone in his pocket. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he wasn't alone, but in the shadows, unseen, the guards followed. Their orders were clear. Watch him, test him, break him if necessary. The single mother stood by her window that night, looking out into the street. She saw him pass, his shoulders heavy, his steps tired. Her chest ached. She realized she owed him more than thanks. He had given her family hope. Now she would have to protect him, because kindness was no longer just kindness. It had become a spark, and sparks, if left unchecked, could set fire to the whole city. By the next week, the market no longer sounded the same. The usual noise of bargaining, shouting, and laughter was still there, but under it flowed something new. Whispers. Quiet voices passed from stall to stall, carried like wind through the crowd. "Did you hear about the human cashier?" someone asked. "They say he paid for a stranger's food." "For an alien mother, no less," another replied, almost spitting the words. "Foolish or brave," came a softer voice. The story had taken root, growing bigger each time it was told. Some said he gave the woman a feast. Others claimed he saved her from starvation in front of 1,000 witnesses. The truth didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the idea. A human had done what no one else dared, and ideas were dangerous. In the back alleys, beggars spoke of him with awe. "The human doesn't look away when you're hungry," one said. "He sees us." Workers in the lower districts nodded quietly, their hearts heavy with years of being ignored. For them, it was not about food. It was about dignity. But in the higher quarters, the story turned sharp. Merchants sneered, saying, "This human wants to play hero? Let him pay for all the poor then. He'll starve before he saves anyone." Guards muttered to one another, "If this spreads, order will crumble. Aliens respecting humans? That cannot be allowed." Inside the market, the cashier worked as he always did, calm, steady, silent, but he could feel the stares burning into him. Some eyes carried hate, others carried hope. Both were dangerous. One afternoon, a frail alien man stepped into his line. His hands shook as he placed a single apple on the counter. When the price flashed on the screen, the man froze. His pockets were empty. Shame colored his face as he turned to leave. The human's hand moved quickly. He swiped his card without a word. The apple beeped as paid. The old man stared at him in shock. "Why?" he whispered. The cashier said only, "Eat." That moment didn't go unseen. A small crowd had gathered, pretending to shop while they watched. Whispers rushed through them like fire catching dry leaves. Another story, another spark. That night, the guards met in a hidden chamber. Their leader slammed a fist on the table. "It is spreading. Every day more talk of this human, this. They call him generous, they call him just. Soon they will call him leader. Do you understand what that means?" One guard growled. "It means we break him now, before the poor begin to follow him." But another, younger guard hesitated. "Break him for kindness?" His words earned him sharp glares. He fell silent, but in his chest, the question burned. Meanwhile, the single mother sat in her small home, listening to her children chatter. They spoke of the human cashier with bright voices, calling him strong, calling him kind. Her heart swelled with gratitude, but also fear. She knew what whispered stories could do. They could build hope, yes. But hope was something the rulers feared most. The next day, the market felt heavier. More guards than usual stood near the human's counter, their armor gleaming, their eyes cold. Customers shifted nervously, but still, they came. Some quietly placed coins for others who could not pay. Others copied the human's calm words, saying, "Eat," as they handed food to the hungry. It was small, almost invisible, but it was happening. One act had become many. The human noticed it too. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened when he saw a young alien merchant slip an extra loaf of bread into a poor woman's bag. Change was beginning, slow but certain. But so was danger. That evening, as he closed the market, a shadow moved in the alley. A hand grabbed his shoulder. He turned sharply to find the single mother standing there, her children asleep on her back. "You must be careful," she whispered urgently. "The guards are watching you. They see what you're doing. They don't see kindness, they see rebellion." He studied her face, calm even in her fear. "I'm not fighting anyone," he said quietly. "I'm just feeding who I can." She shook her head. "You don't understand. Feeding the hungry is not just feeding. It is saying they deserve to live. And to the powerful, that is the greatest rebellion of all." Her words hung in the air. For the first time, the human cashier realized the weight of what he had begun. He had not meant to lead anyone, yet footsteps were already following him. Behind them, unseen in the shadows, two guards watched with narrow eyes. One whispered, "Tomorrow, we end this." The mother clutched his arm before hurrying away, her warning echoing in his ears. The human walked home alone, the lucky pebble from the boy warm in his pocket. He thought of the whispers, of the children's gifts, of the old man's apple. He had only wanted to ease hunger for a moment. But now it seemed he had fed something far greater, not just bodies, but hope. And hope was dangerous. The market was louder than usual that morning, but it wasn't the usual kind of noise. It was nervous, sharp, and uneven, like thunder rolling before a storm. People whispered while pretending to shop, eyes darting toward one place again and again. The human's counter. The cashier stood behind it as always, scanning items with steady hands. His face was calm, but his chest felt heavy. He had noticed the extra guards, the stares, the strange quiet between shouts. Something was coming. He could feel it. It began when a thin alien child stepped into his line. The boy carried nothing but a small piece of fruit. His clothes were torn, his face dirty. The cashier scanned the fruit and the price blinked on the screen. The boy's eyes dropped. He had no money. The market seemed to freeze. All eyes turned to the human. Would he do it again? Would he pay? The cashier's hand didn't hesitate. He slid his card into the reader. The beep sounded sharp and final. He handed the fruit to the boy. "Eat," he said softly. The boy's face lit up, and he ran off into the crowd. But the moment shattered the market's silence. Murmurs rose, spreading fast. Some smiled, others hissed, and then the guards moved. 4 of them stepped forward, armor clinking, boots heavy on the stone floor. Their leader's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Enough." The crowd pulled back, forming a circle. The guard stopped at the counter, the leader's eyes dark and cold, locked on the cashier. "You've been warned," he growled. "You will not continue this. Your kindness ends here." The cashier looked at him without fear. His voice was calm, but it carried through the silence. "I feed the hungry, that is all." "That is rebellion," the leader snapped. His words echoed across the stalls. "You make the weak believe they have rights. You make the poor think they deserve more. You turn order into chaos." The human said nothing. He only stood tall, his rough hands resting on the counter. His silence was louder than words. From the crowd, a voice cried out. It was the single mother. She had come with her children, and now she pushed forward, her face pale but fierce. "He is no rebel," she shouted. "He saved us when no one else would. He gave my children food." The guards turned on her, their eyes burning. "Silence," the leader barked. "Your words mean nothing." But another voice rose from the crowd. An old man, the same one who had been given the apple. His voice trembled, but it carried. "He gave to me too. He asked for nothing in return." Then another spoke. A merchant who had once slipped extra bread into a bag. "He is right. Kindness is not rebellion." The murmurs swelled into shouts. One after another, voices rose. The circle around the counter was no longer silent. It was alive. The guards shifted uneasily. The leader snarled, "You will stop, human, or you will be punished." He placed his hand on his weapon, metal scraping against its holster. The crowd gasped. Mothers pulled their children close. Fear rippled through the market. The cashier didn't move. His voice was quiet, but every ear strained to hear it. "If feeding the hungry is a crime, then punish me. But know this, hunger will not end with me. It lives in all of them." He gestured to the crowd. "And kindness cannot be killed." The silence that followed was broken by a cry. The single mother stepped forward, standing between the guards and the cashier. Her children clung to her legs, but her voice did not shake. "If you punish him, you punish us all." The old man joined her, standing tall despite his weak frame. "And me." One by one, others stepped forward. Merchants, beggars, mothers, workers. Soon, dozens stood in front of the guards, forming a shield of bodies around the human. The guards hesitated. They were used to fear, to silence, to obedience. But here, in the middle of the market, the people were united. And unity was stronger than any weapon. The leader's eyes burned with rage, but he saw the danger. To strike now would mean open revolt. He spat on the ground and signaled his men. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You've started something you cannot control." The guards withdrew, their heavy boots retreating. The crowd didn't cheer, didn't clap. They stood in silence, their hearts pounding, their eyes fixed on the human cashier. The mother turned to him, tears on her cheeks. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered. For the first time, a faint smile touched his lips. He looked at the faces around him, poor, weak, forgotten, but now burning with something new. Hope. The confrontation had ended without blood, but it had changed everything. The guards had wanted to silence him. Instead, they had revealed him. And now the whole market knew. One act of kindness could challenge power itself. The market never felt the same after that day. The air itself seemed different, filled with something that had not been there before. It was not just noise or trade or the smell of food. It was something stronger, something invisible, yet powerful. It was hope. The guards had retreated, but their warning still hung heavy. This isn't over. Everyone knew they would return. Yet the people also knew something else. Together they were no longer afraid. The human cashier returned to work the next morning as if nothing had happened. He scanned items, gave change, stacked crates, and wiped the counter. His face was calm, but his eyes carried quiet fire. He knew every move he made was being watched. Still, he chose to stand there, unbroken. And then something remarkable began. A mother, with 3 children, paid for her bread, but she bought an extra loaf. She placed it on the counter and whispered, "For someone who has none." Later, a young merchant, nervous but determined, added a handful of fruit to a beggar's bag without charging him. An old worker paid for more rice than he needed and left half behind. "Give it to the hungry," he told the cashier softly. The human saw all of it. He said little, but his heart stirred. His one act had spread. Others were copying him. Not everyone, not yet, but enough to show that kindness could move like fire through dry wood. The single mother came again, her children at her side. They no longer looked frightened when they walked through the market. They stood proudly, heads high. She thanked him once more, but he only shook his head. "It's not me anymore," he said. "It's all of you." Still, the danger grew. The guards didn't forget. They watched from the edges of the bazaar, their eyes sharp, their patience thin. They couldn't strike openly now. The people had tasted unity, but they whispered in back rooms, planning. One evening, the human left the market and walked the long road home. The streets were dark, the lamps weak. He carried nothing but the little gifts, the wooden bird, the lucky stone, the trinket of Beads. To him, these were treasures. Halfway home, he heard footsteps behind him. Heavy, purposeful. The guards. They followed silently, closing in. He kept walking, his pace steady, but his heart beat faster. He knew what this was. They would not challenge him in daylight again. They would end it quietly, in the shadows. But when he turned the corner, he froze. Dozens of figures waited there. Not guards, not enemies. People. Mothers, children, old workers, beggars. They had gathered holding lamps, their faces glowing in the dark. The single mother stepped forward. "You will not walk alone," she said firmly. The guards stopped in the street, their armor clinking. They had not expected this. A silent wall of people stood between them and the human cashier. No weapons, no threats. Only unity. The leader of the guards sneered. "You think you can protect him forever? He is just one man." But the mother's voice rang out strong and unshaken. "He may be one, but he has given us what you never could. He gave us courage." The crowd raised their lamps higher, dozens of lights glowing against the dark. The guards stared, but they didn't move forward. They knew what this meant. If they struck now, it would not be just against one human. It would be against all of them. Slowly, angrily, the guards turned and marched away into the night. Their leader spat one last warning. "You've lit a fire you cannot control, and one day fire consumes everything." The humans stood quietly, the crowd around him breathing as one. He looked at their faces. Faces once bowed by hunger, now lifted with pride. For the first time he understood. His kindness had never been small. It had been the spark they were waiting for. The mother touched his arm. "You gave us food," she said softly. "But more than that, you gave us strength." He looked at the children holding their lamps high, their eyes shining. He thought of his empty apartment, of his empty stomach. And yet in this moment he felt full. Full in a way no meal could ever give. The city would not change overnight. Hunger would not vanish in a single day. The guards would not stop their watch. But the people had seen something they could never unsee. A human had stood alone, and they had chosen to stand with him. The crowd began to drift away, their lamps lighting the dark streets. The mother and her children lingered last. The little boy pressed the lucky pebble back into the cashier's hand. "Keep it," he whispered. "You'll need it." The cashier nodded. He closed his hand around the stone and looked up at the night sky. One spark, he thought, was enough to light the dark. And though he was just one man, the fire had already begun.